To interpret, you need technique. You need access to your voice, and then you need to know what to do with it. Limited access is limited interpretation.
Okay, so this might become the leader of the episode then. No, that's a great answer. Thank you.
The Voice Boys. En het mysterie van...
Estill Voice Training!
Hallo allemaal!
Hello, everybody. We're doing this internationally today. And welcome, Anne-Marie Speed. Yay!
Yay!
Our first ever international guest. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and talk to you today. I really appreciate it.
Well, the excitement is all ours. Tell us where you are in the world. I'm currently in Belgium.
Right, I am in London. I'm in North London.
Ah, the beautiful. I used to live there for a long time and I miss it every day.
Well, I'm here from Hilversum in Netherlands, so we're quite international today. Wonderful.
The European get-together of singing today.
Well, it's funny because Anne-Marie, we're absolutely excited to have you on our podcast. And I don't think you remember, but it's not the first time we've met because I've been in one of your courses, I think maybe 10 years ago, and it was about diction. I think it was called Diction at a Distance. Is that correct? Or?
May have been, yes, it may have been.
It was wonderful. It was in Arnhem in the Netherlands.
Yes.
Together with a buddy of mine, Lars Mak. I don't know if you remember him.
Yes, indeed, yes.
And it was amazing and a real eye opener. And I've never looked at singing that way before. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Jo Estill, because that is also very much that work has been very much informed by her and her course on diction at a distance. And as I know you've got me here to talk a little bit about Estill this evening, I think that is something that a lot of people don't know, that her diction work was absolutely extraordinary. I bring other things into it from my own training and experience, but that basic information of understanding the sounds, and in particular how the ear hears, I think is absolutely transformational for actors and singers and teachers.
Wonderful. Or maybe I need to look into this then. So, Anne-Marie, for people who don't know you, could you just maybe give us a brief overview of who you are, what you do, and what your expertise in the field of singing is at the moment?
I am a vocal coach. I work with both the speaking voice, the actor's voice, and the singing voice. And my work is mostly with performers. I work a lot in the West End. I coach a lot of shows, a lot of individuals. I also work in film and TV, preparing actors for roles. I also have some performers who are in the pop world, pop and rock world, a couple of performers in the classical world. And I'm also an accent and dialect coach and a performance coach. And I'm not saying for one moment that I am an expert in all of those fields, but what brings it all together is Estill. And my experience with this was I first met Jo Estill in 1991 when I was doing my voice teacher training at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, and what was then the Advanced Diploma in Voice Studies, and which is now an MA. And what was then the Voice Research Society was doing one of their study days on different vocal techniques, and there was quite a buzz about Jo Estill, and she was in a room talking about her work, and it was just all these lights going off, all of these explanations about how the voice actually functions, connecting movement to sound. And I'd never heard anything like that before. And I think historically now that influence on voice teaching is one of her legacies, absolutely. That connection between movement and sound and what comes out of the mouth. That really didn't happen in that way before, not at all, not as specifically as that. So when the British Voice Association, which it then was, brought Jo Estill over to teach her first course in the UK in 1992, I was there, and that was when I met some wonderful colleagues of mine who've been colleagues ever since, including Mary Hammond. And she invited me in 1994 to help her as she was establishing the first musical theatre course within a classical conservatoire here in the UK, the Royal Academy of Music, which is the UK's oldest classical conservatoire. And she got me in to bring Estill in through the back door, through the teaching of the actor's voice, which I still do. So I'm still there teaching on that course, which I love. And also that year, Jo Estill asked me to go and assist her on a course in Copenhagen. That was the first time I worked with her, and really from then on, I was working with her for about 15 or so years. After the good 10 years or so. I'm just trying to work out now how long it was actually for. And it was an incredibly informative and inspirational time to be working with her and mentored by her and to become friends with her. She was quite wonderful.
Have you had that fascination for the voice always, or was that really sort of a pivotal moment? Or but I'm actually quite interested in your journey with the voice and singing or speaking before Joe Estill as well, because usually people get it from their childhoods.
Absolutely, absolutely. My dad was a very keen amateur performer. He was also a broadcaster, and he ended up doing some training, speech training for broadcasters, for newscasters and people on the radio, where I grew up in New Zealand. And he was also very keen on amateur dramatics and loved Shakespeare. And I remember doing dishes on a Saturday morning and helping him learn his lines from Hamlet. And so there was always poetry. There was always he also had a marvelous voice. He had a really wonderful voice, wonderful singing voice, and wonderful speaking voice. So there was an interest in voice and performance from a very early age. And then I came to the UK a long time ago now. I was working as an actor actually in New Zealand after I left university, and I thought I would come here to train, come to London to train. So I did, and there's nothing like doing your acting training to make you realise that's not what you want to do, isn't it? I mean,
I actually reckon, yeah.
It was quite a shock, though. You know, you don't traveling 12,000 miles and realising that wasn't actually quite what I wanted to do. So I thought, all right. So I did some acting. I think the issue was for me, I couldn't find my fit. I just couldn't find my fit. I couldn't find certainly then, you know, the kind of work that I really wanted to do. And also I just lost the passion for it. And then a colleague of mine, friend of mine, said, well, why don't you think about retraining as a voice teacher? And I thought, oh, yeah, I'm quite interested in that. So I auditioned for the course at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, or Central School of Speech and Drama as it was then. And I got in and I thought, yeah, okay. And then I remember starting the first day and going, oh, this is really interesting. This is really interesting. And that really just that's about training the actor's voice, but that really stimulated my interest further. And I met some wonderful tutors, and then the work that I was doing. And then working at the Royal Academy of Music, I was working at some musical theatre courses before that. I still was doing a little bit of acting, but also I had so many issues with my own voice, my own singing. I couldn't belt, and I remember thinking, you know, why can't I belt? You know, I'm not unteachable, and I'm not stupid, and I don't think there's anything wrong with me vocally. And I remember going to all of the top London teachers and paying, you know, what was a lot of money for me then, is a lot of money now, and no one could tell me. And most lessons would end with me being told you had to be born to do it. And I thought, okay. And I think that particularly then, this is still true for many people, this idea that belt is just chest voice pushed higher. I had a really good chest voice. You know, I'd done a lot of acting. It was all acoustic, nothing wrong with my chest voice, and it didn't work. And I thought, So, and it isn't chest voice pushed higher, as we know. I hope we can explain that. But it was listening to her and hearing such clear descriptions of function, of movement in relation to a clear, predictable, narrow range of acoustic consequences, as I would say. That is what makes it unique and still makes it unique. Lots of people borrow from that now.
Yeah.
And sometimes with or without acknowledgement, but that's where it comes from.
I'm quite interested in what was your light bulb moment in terms of belting then?
Well, doing the course for the first time and realizing that there was a physical description, a set of physical conditions that need to be met, and I wasn't meeting them. And so what isn't happening? So if we understand that voice production is a result of what we do, that there are patterns of behavior associated with pitch, with dynamic, with voice quality, even with emotion, once we understand that there are patterns, there are ingredients, if you like, that come together in a certain way, And once we understand what is missing from the conditions, we have something very precise to practice. It took me a long time. I basically had to work it out myself in terms of my own voice, and it took me about 8 years. But that means that, you know, I can teach people much more quickly now. It doesn't take them 8 years, but there are certain, you know, physical conditions that need to be in place for any way of using the voice. And I will often say to people, if there is something that you can't do with your voice, it's because there's something that you haven't done for your voice. So what conditions are missing?
It's the same light bulb moment you had that what you want to produce as a sound, it's trainable. That was a wonderful moment. The first time I heard that on the conservatory, also with the EVT course, for me that was amazing. And I know that in that afternoon, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I was like, it's trainable. I can be taught anything if I study hard enough. That's
Well, my light bulb moment in terms of EVT, so we're kind of rushing ahead now, but I think it's important in this part of the conversation is it was the first time there was actual measurable language that people used to describe a sound and to describe something that actually we could talk about, that it wasn't a vague idea, that there was a concept, and that, as you said, there were things that you just need, there were rules that you needed to follow. And then suddenly you get these very concrete tools to create a certain sound, or at least to train a certain sound. And that was entirely new. I remember as a young singer, even before I went to conservatoire, that talking about singing with every teacher was different. They all had a different idea. They all had different language. And suddenly we all spoke the same language. And it was sort of like, why hasn't anyone said this to me ever before? Sort of that feeling.
Yeah, the thing is that while there is a language to describe function and the movement and the conditions, how each teacher relates to that is individual.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that you get different doctors, that they will focus on different things. You know, that we have physiology, we have the way the body works, and that's true for voice. The voice is part of the body. There are rules of behavior, but how we use those rules, how we apply them, how we learn them is different for each individual. And I think it's a very important point. There's a lot of misunderstanding about Estill Voice Training, and it is not standardized in that sense. What we do is, as teachers, is, as any teacher does, is that you listen and you try to work out what's missing, and you try to work out a physical cause for what's missing in the voice, and you give your student, if that is what they're there for, a technical lesson, or is it a lesson to do with role or artistry or style? But you give them exercises to help introduce the movement that's going to allow them to make the sound. Each person will hear something different.
Yeah.
So I think when we are talking about the conditions, I prefer conditions rather than rules.
Mm-hmm.
There are conditions needed. If we want to go high in the range, the larynx has to rise. But how much anyone needs to do that depends on the individual. So we're always tailoring the information to wherever the client is, what's their starting points. We're always meeting the client. We're meeting them. So many lessons that people go to, a teacher starts teaching without really listening and assessing to what is going on. And one's ability to assess and adjust and tailor the information to the individual, I think, is absolutely crucial.
Isn't that always the problem in any kind of singing teaching environment, that you're listening to sound, but you're also listening to quality, and you're also listening to musicality, and then does it fit the role? And it's always there's multiple disciplines involved, which makes our job tricky. And sometimes if you look at one, the others follow suit, which is great.
And sometimes when you look at one and you try to fix it, the other ones, they drop off
Disappear.
at the same time, which is even harder.
But I think that journey and the search is also what brings us to liking this job, because it's always challenging and it's always different, and every individual comes with their own challenges and, as you said, set of conditions.
Absolutely, and there are certain things that you encounter again and again, if you like, but each presentation is slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you're working with someone, which I do quite often, people who are in 8 shows a week, And what if they're doing cover runs? I worked with someone last week, or this week actually, 9 performances last week she gave. So it's 8 performances for the show and then a cover run.
We have a terrible business in that regard.
Okay. And she said, I think I'm a bit tired. I said, you think? You know, yeah, you might be a little bit tired. But the fact is, it's people do it, and they can do it. It's just that it will see 8 shows a week will seek out every vulnerability in your technique and in yourself and put it under pressure. So there are so many things that you're dealing with but people do. But dealing with fatigue is a very, very common one. The slightly loss of range, etc., etc. Yeah. Overworking.
So tell us a little bit more about Jo Estill. You've known her personally. What made her so special, so unique, and what do you think you've taken from her into your own practice?
She influenced me hugely in terms of both, not just in terms of what she taught, but how she taught. And she faced a lot of prejudice because she was really challenging pretty much everybody with the way that she taught. You know, so I met her in 1992, so this is over 30 years ago, and she was beginning to present what was first of all called voicecraft in the early 80s. And it is very difficult to understand now just how alien this approach to singing was, because it was deemed to be too technical and not artistic. And Jo Estill started off as a singer. She didn't become a teacher and start her research, become a scientist, until she was 45. She started from scratch at 45. She'd had no scientific training at all. It's important for people to understand she became one of the great voice researchers of the late 20th century. One of the most influential and one of the best. Hugely rigorous in her thinking and in her approach. She was a scientist, but she was also an artist. And she was an extraordinary singer. She was a singer of international quality. In 1954, her brother and her husband, her then husband, felt that her voice was marketable, so she was been 32, I think. And they paid for her to come to do a tour of Europe. And she sang in Germany, she sang at the Wigmore Hall here in London, and she was about to open the Festival of Holland. And that would have launched her onto the international stage. But her husband had a heart attack. And so they went back to small town America. And Jo felt that, you know, it was one of those, it was terrible, but in a way it was obviously more terrible for him. But he survived, thankfully. Their marriage didn't. They separated some years later. But she then just stayed in Colorado, and she said she became the best voice at 100 miles. And she said, but there weren't many voices within 100 miles. So, and that kind of comment was very typical of her, because she was a truly great voice, a voice of international standing in the field of opera. But she had incredible modesty. There was no ego in that sense. She would present the information. She wasn't there to sell a method. She was there to change the way that voice was understood and taught. That was her mission.
And is that something that you try to apply into your teaching now?
What I always try to do is meet each individual where they are and help them whatever level they are at. Because no matter who you are, if you are, and for want of a better expression, an elite performer, the consequences of failure are much, much greater. But whether you are auditioning for your local amateur dramatic society, you still get nervous. Everybody gets nervous. Every person's use of their voice is just as important to them. It's just for people for whom it is their job, it's an international platform for failure if you do. And everyone has an opinion.
Yeah.
That's true.
Unfortunately.
You know? Yeah. And what I find incredible with some of the performers that I work with, particularly I'm helping an actor to sing who is not known for singing, and they're taking on a role that's going to be quite a big role, and you're helping them sing, and you know, I have great faith in the information. I know the information works. I've been testing it for over 30 years. It works. If it didn't work, I wouldn't be doing it. But am I able to help that person shift them on? That's a different thing. Am I able to find the way that they work? But their willingness to take on board something so big and so different is really humbling. and the risk of failure. And they do it anyway. I was working with someone a couple of years ago. We finished our lesson and she said, right, she said, I'm off to see my trauma therapist. And I went, oh, I mean, how do you respond to that? I went, oh, right. She said, really? She said, yes. She says, I'm going back on stage, as you know. And she said, and I'm absolutely terrified. So despite that, the terror, they will still do it.
That's actually the most important reason I stopped performing, because I got so incredibly nervous, and somehow the first 5 years I got over it by just being young and brutal. I don't know. I think it's like, I thought, like, let's just go for it.
Yeah.
And but afterwards I thought, what am I doing to myself? Why am I doing this? Well, I'm really happy to help other people get over it and make them feel more secure by teaching them how the voice works and giving them like practical tools. But the vulnerability you have as a performer is, it's something else.
And and basically, I still live through that experience on a daily basis. So I've just gone on for 2 weeks for a cover that you never rehearse. I mean, it's the stress of life, and then that
Right.
voice needs to still work, and nobody is there to solve your problems. No, problem is, I'm the vocal captain as well, so I'd have to solve my own problem.
Well, actually, that's when you need someone to go to see.
Well,
Because
actually,
it's
I go and see Dan. So
yeah, no, absolutely, because it's very difficult to solve your own problems in those contexts. It is very difficult. Yeah.
I kid you not, I've said that to a student today.
Yeah.
So we're all in agreement here.
Yeah.
I want to. I have another anecdote. Something that I still remember from Joe Estill. What happened was, I think she died in 2010. That was
That's right.
15 years ago, and we were studying at the Code Arts Conservatoire then. And the day she died, all of our singing teachers they were devastated. And there was something. They all trained with her. They all met her. They all did courses with her, and they were all devastated. And we as students, we didn't know what happened, but there was something, and there was a big dark energy in the school, and then there was some realization that they've lost someone special, and that I don't think I'm ever going to forget that day, because all the teachers were so sad.
I was teaching a course. I think I was in Swallow.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. And I had a phone call in the middle of the course.
Wow.
Oh, how did you deal with that?
Well, it was really quite a shock, but I thought I'm here to share her work. So I just, and focused on trying to teach the best course that I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That must have been tough.
It was a challenge. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about, like, maybe there are people that haven't heard of Estill in our podcast. So maybe to start from the basics, is there a way you can explain in maybe a couple of minutes what makes Estill so
The basic principles, really.
yeah, exactly, the basic principles, yeah.
Well, it's an evidence-based system of voice training. It's based on research. But what it does is it identifies the structures going from the larynx into the tongue, jaw, soft palate, the structures that both produce voice and control resonance, or voice quality as we call it. So we look at the different structures and we gain control of those structures, independent voluntary control of these structures, and then we look at how they come together to produce certain sounds. And a really key part of this is that this training is separate to any musical standard. And this is very much what happens on the courses that we teach. But what it does is it looks at what produces voice. Let's identify precisely what produces voice, what sound comes from this, how does it influence the sound, how do we train it, how do we understand how they work together to produce more complex sounds, and so that we can understand the individual elements that go to make an opera sound, for example, or a belt sound, or a speech sound. What are some basic information, basic conditions needed to go higher in the range? The larynx has to rise It's interesting that that is still controversial to some people, but the larynx needs to move. A larynx that doesn't move is a larynx that's in trouble. And it's part of what happens with muscle tension dysphonia. If the larynx really, really can't move, there's loss of range, loss of voice, it's a problem. So the larynx needs to move. And that with that movement, as I said, there are other things that are needed to produce different pitches, volume, and voice quality. But the key thing about the separate to a stylistic standard is important. So I'll often start a course by saying to people, who's been told to lift the soft palate? People always put their hand up, right? Okay. And then I'll say, were you told how? Or were you just told, you're not lifting your soft palate? No, you're not lifting your soft palate. That's not teaching. How many people are told to lift the soft palate by dropping the tongue? Well, you might be lifting the soft palate, but you can't really tell because all of the feedback is coming from the tongue. Yawning is often a way. Going to yawn. What else is happening? The tongue is lowering, the larynx is lowering. So it's not independent. So it changes the sound. So if I want to control my soft palate, at the moment it's staying fairly raised. So the soft palate is a back door to the nose. When the soft palate is in a mid position, the sound is nasal. And when it's raised, it's oral. It's nasal, it's oral. That doesn't require any musical skill. You don't need to know how to perform a diatonic scale in order to control your soft palate. And we need to be able to control the soft palate in speaking and singing. Any style, any language, any genre. So we can learn these things, and that would be craft. So Estill's voice training is divided into 3 separate studies. The first is craft. How does your voice work? What do you need to do to get control over it? Then the second study is artistry. How do we then use that technical information to fulfill the demands of style? What are they? That's a separate study. That's artistry. What do you want to do to fulfill the requirements of this aria, this musical, this speech? And then the third element is we've got craft, it's technique, artistry, understanding style, application, acting. And then the third element, she said, was metaphysics. And that is what they say in athletics is getting into the zone. So how do we get out of our own heads? How do we do that? How do we begin to control the ego? And what you were saying, Dan, about nerves. Joe Estill would be physically sick for days before performing. So that isn't something that we offer a course on. I have looked at psychology. I'm actually looking at a course on psychology for teachers towards the end of September, which is not so much about this, but is looking at the different issues that students present in lessons and how we help create an optimum learning environment. So how do we deal with emotional responses in a lesson? So it's also that. How do we deal with emotion? As we know, as you just said, Dan, people give up because of nerves. She gave up. She didn't want to do it.
It's a horrible experience. It's like facing death.
Yeah, and it feels pretty grim. So that
There's also an
really
upside to that, right? I mean, if it works, if you make it, if some, you're always looking for the magical moment, And I believe it actually was called that when I took your course. You talked about looking for the performance magic, like getting into the zone. I thought it was called like that then.
Yes, yeah, performance magic, absolutely. It's sports, it's performance psychology, and this has been a big deal in sports for decades. And the arts are still catching up. And I think the Royal College of Music, not the Royal Academy, but I think that the Royal College of Music here in London, which is a separate institution, I think they are now having courses in this because everybody gets nervous. I don't think I've worked with anybody who doesn't get nervous, but for some people it becomes debilitating. And that then prevents you doing what you've spent all of those years, all that time and effort and emotion and money training to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes realise actually that isn't what I want to do, and that's fine too, and a little shift is good too. But everyone needs strategies to deal with nerves.
Just this segment of our episode proves how complex our job is, really, because you have to deal with so many things, and we try to do it all at the same time, and preferably within an hour, but it takes time.
Well, it does take time, and I think a huge part of a lesson is trying to work out what is the priority. So obviously what your client says, which must always be taken into consideration, but what they identify may not actually be the cause. So we've got to think about that. But coming back to craft, artistry and metaphysics, that's also quite a useful framing. So is it a technical issue? Is it an artistic issue? Is it an emotional issue? Mm-hmm. Is it a processes. So which one is it? And you can move between those things, of course, but it gives you a starting point. And I think that of course the emotion is only expressed physically. So by dealing with the physical expression of emotions, we can also help with the experience of the emotion.
I think that sentence might become the leader of the episode because I love that.
Well, I'm borrowing a quote from a wonderful psychologist here called Philippa Perry, and she has written some wonderful books and does a column on psychology. And I used to say emotion is muscular, but she says emotion is physical, and I think that's better and more accurate because it's heart rate and it's hormones and it's all of those things too, and muscular. But emotion is felt in the body. It's not telepathy.
No. And the body doesn't lie.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It gets confused, but
Yeah. Tell my osteopath. So I was wondering, in terms of Estill and the technique, from 2010 till now, have there been any major changes? And also, what does the future hold for EVT?
oh, I think there have been enormous changes, and some of the changes have come about through just teaching of it. Just the teaching of it, and the teaching of it will tell you a lot about how it works. And I've been teaching this for over 30 years. And I've been, in terms of the level 1 and 2 courses that I teach, I think I don't know exactly, but it must be coming up to about 120 of these courses that I've taught. And every course I teach, I learn something. So the content, I mean, what we're doing with voice, certain things don't change. The vocal folds need to make contact, preferably. All right,
Preferably.
the rise. Well, for our purposes, doesn't have to, but if we are
It's going to be
talking about something,
another episode then.
yeah, talking about something that I like to talk about something that's functionally efficient first of all before we start to talk about the artistic choices. But I think there have been huge changes in the way that we teach it. But for the fundamental information in terms of what needs to happen for the voice to be produced remains the same. There's all kinds of very interesting research, a lot of research, absolutely supporting and backing up Joe Estill's original research, which is very, very interesting as well. And just a little word about that. The research may be old, but it was absolutely first class. And people are... she trained her subjects, and you had to audition to be in her research party, research cohort. And if you trained and you auditioned, you didn't get in, you weren't in one of the subjects of her research.
But also, it takes a village to do this, and a good village.
Absolutely right. And so there was a wonderful Japanese researcher, ENT laryngologist, Dr. Yaeji Yanagisawa, and he was an absolute superstar in America in the 80s, late 70s and 80s. And this is just when they were starting to bring out video endoscopy. And Joe Estill pioneered the use of video endoscopy in voice training. And the reason that she had access to this phenomenally expensive equipment is because Dr. Yanagisawa liked her model of voice training. And he wanted to use her model to look at voice and to test the equipment.
Do you have any wishes or hopes for the singing world within, let's say, 20 years? What do you think the possibilities are? Or what do you hope the possibilities are? Or is that a tricky question?
It's not one I've really thought about, to be honest with you. I keep kind of trundling on. But there are certain things that I see, and what I hope we can continue to find. What's very interesting, and I think Joe Estill really did start this ball rolling. We see people with much better technique, without a doubt. Here in the UK now, everybody can belt. That was not the case 20 years ago. That was not the case. Wasn't the case in Holland. And it wasn't the case, when I did my very first Estill course in Germany in 2004. That wasn't happening there. I know, there wasn't any musical theatre. But, everybody can belt now. People need more of a strong mix. In the opera world, things have changed hugely too. The range and the quality of voices, there are so many more better singers, but there aren't better artists. And I think for me, the facility is the first thing. That's hugely important. It's not that it doesn't matter. But I always encourage people to see, what do you want to do with it? It's a tool. It's a tool. And what are you going to use the voice to express? And we want to hear more of your voice. And certainly in the pop world, it's true in opera, I suppose, too, and in musical theatre, certain sounds dominate or become fashionable for a little while. But I think it's so important that within that people have to be adaptable in the way that they make their voices, or produce their voices or use their voices. And while the voice is hugely adaptable, within each of these different qualities, there is something that identifies you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very important, that we are training individual voices, and voices that allow us to hear something of what's important to you as an artist. And it's the training of the artist that I'm very interested in. Because at the end of the day, it's all about, what story are you telling? Mm-hmm. What are you able to communicate? What do you want people to feel? What do you want them to take away? What story? Getting back to the diction. Yeah. And if it's a really good story, people forgive a lot of things about the voice, but the voice is there in the service of the music, the poem, the speech, the play, whatever it is that you're doing. We are in the service of that. Mm-hmm. And and you can get people with great voices and great artistry, but a great voice on its own is a bit dull.
You need to have a story to tell.
Yes, and you need to know how to tell it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing. How do we train artistry? So that is, I suppose, really that all of the, I always say, all the fancy voice stuff is about telling a better story.
Mm-hmm. Well, we learned from an acting teacher. He said that an amateur can make maybe one good performance, but the beauty is to try to live it all again and make every performance you're doing the real magic every day again. So it's really that's the real what do you say de uitdaging,
challenge.
That's a real challenge for an actor to do it every day, and as if you've never done it again before.
That's right, and you know, as with the singer too, you've got the same words to say, but you have to meet it again, and that's when the psychology, the training, is very, very important, and the whole approach to that. It's a very it's a real discipline being able to do that, without a doubt. It's hugely important, and not just repeating a performance, because it's never the same. The audience is never the same, and it's not film. I say that I've worked on a lot of films, coaching actors for films, and one of the big differences is, of course, that when you've got your shoot schedule, and you might have, say it's a big scene, and you might have one day in a location to shoot the scene, and then once that's done and wrapped, that's it. You don't get to go back. Well, very rarely. Sometimes you do, but and so they're a completely different set of pressures. But the fact that you have to deliver that performance, and you don't get endless takes. There isn't time.
This is super interesting that you say that, because I've had the privilege to do TV and a stage, and I always say the scene lives for an hour or two, and then it's gone, and on stage you have to recreate it night by night, and sometimes you just need that extra level of skill to do it again and again and again and again, and that's basically where we come in, I think.
Yeah, well, it is. It's a very, very different toll on the body. But a 3-month film shoot can be, depending on what you're doing, hugely. I mean, very early starts, early days, the discipline, turning up on set, starting at 8:30. You can be doing the same scene from 8:30 to 6 o'clock at night. I was working on a TV pilot last year, about this time, about October last year, and this marvelous young actress. She honestly, this is what she did. It was the same scene, different people. It's quite a big scene. They did the same scene from 8:30 to 6 o'clock. She was still making me laugh at 6 o'clock in the evening, which I told her, because I always tell. It was phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. The discipline and focus. So that ability to have endurance and stamina, a different type of stamina, but is also true for film. Mm-hmm. But I think just the sheer volume that one has to produce on stage, even when you're mic'd, and the physical impact of that is something that takes a very different training and practice.
Yeah.
So I have another question though, because one of the things we do, we study a lot of other singing techniques. And what my question to you is, what have you learned from other singing techniques apart from Estill Voice Training?
That nothing else works as well.
Well said.
In all honesty, I mean, there are things that you might learn in terms of explanations of perhaps artistry. I think, but we're talking about function, we're talking about technique. The reason I still teach it is because it's answered every question for me, or it's shown me how to find an answer to a question. I think it's so specific, but it then allows you, once you understand that, you can engage with that very artistically and use of imagery if you want. No one is saying you have to teach it a certain way. When you teach a course, but as a teacher, it informs how you teach, how you access it, how you share that information is up to you. I have my own particular way of understanding it and teaching it, of course. But I think the other person who has informed me hugely would be Janice Chapman. And you should get her on.
We would love to, but we do not have the contact details.
I can send you contact details for her. Janice works with opera, and I met Janice when I hadn't been in the UK for very long. So I've known Janice Chapman, goodness me, for almost 40 years. I can't quite believe that. And certainly over 35. And Janice helped me out hugely with my own voice. And then when I feel I didn't really had enough to teach when I first started teaching as a voice teacher. And she is someone else who brings a real rigor. She was also on that first course with Joe Estill in 1992, but I'd met her before that. And she has been an absolute powerhouse. She works in a different way with opera. That is what she does, with, as I said, tremendous rigor and knowledge. And Janice absolutely would be someone, I would say, who, as an individual teacher and with her own way of teaching. I think Mary Hammond as well is someone who has influenced me hugely. She might be a very interesting person to have on. She's an absolute force of nature. Her sheer determination to get a musical theatre course into the oldest classical conservatoire in the UK. You can imagine she was invited to do it. She'd been doing some courses, but it was still a huge challenge. And to also bring more rigor to the teaching. So there are certainly many individual teachers who have been, those are probably the two, and with Joe Estill, my three biggest influences, I would say. But Joe Estill, from a technical point of view, and how it trains your ear as a teacher. So you can hear a sound and understand what needs to move. And that is a huge gift. And Joe Estill was, in the true sense of the word, she was a genius.
You're not the first person to say that about her in this mini series.
Yeah, and I do mean that quite genuinely, because to take such a complex system and to be able to break it down into trainable and understandable exercises with a clear connection to an acoustic result. So it's not one thing, it's a range of results, a predictable, narrow range of acoustic results, as I describe it. But that is remarkable. Then the things that she observed, the training of identifying the false vocal folds as being the cause of constriction. People use this term all of the time. When she first started out and identified constriction as being the action of the false vocal folds, no one else did that. That comes from her. She looked for definitions of constriction. There weren't any. People talk about the false vocal folds. They do that because of Joe Estill. When talk to anyone who's been, trained 30 years ago, nobody was talking about the false vocal folds.
Well, we need pioneers, and I think everyone that we've spoken to so far in terms of contemporary techniques always acknowledges Joe Estill with fondness, which is actually beautiful.
Well, it's not just for contemporary, it's musical theatre, it's also classical.
I
use it with the
I meant
active
that,
voice.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I'm just clarifying for people listening. So
Yeah.
But there are many of my colleagues. I don't work with many opera singers. I am not an opera teacher. I go in as a vocal technician. It's not that I'm entirely ignorant of it at all. I do know a little bit about it, but the performers that I work with, because there's so much going on, it's so important to make things as functionally as efficient as possible, and that's what I can help people do. And the range of work that I do is only possible because of this.
I think it's also beautiful that you don't need to understand as a teacher the whole musical concept. For instance, if you're doing Puccini, you don't need to know everything about Puccini, but you need to know how the voice functions to teach someone to make the sound they want to produce. So it's not always you have to understand everything, but you need to be able to help them and understand what they need to do to produce that sound.
That's true, but I think you do need to know something about the style. I think it's very difficult, certainly as a young teacher, to teach something if you don't know the style.
True.
Because then you get a bit prescriptive. So if I'm working with a style of singing I'm unfamiliar with, so try to identify or some opera or composer that I'm less familiar with, I'll say, so what's the issue? Let's deal with the issue. Is that feeling better? Yes. How's the sound? Is this the right sound? Could be, but okay, let's then play with the sound. So if it's an experienced performer, I rely on them to tell me if we're in the right area in terms of the sound that you're making. But I think teachers, it's very important that teachers do understand style, and they need to know something about the sound, because otherwise you don't want to be teaching people to make a sound that isn't appropriate.
True. Internet is failing at the moment. But it's funny though, because just the other day we talked about this, and we don't have the ego as a teacher. We don't mind sending people to a colleague of us just because we think that he can maybe teach them better things that suit with them. If it's for instance, I'm not a classical guy. I know musical theater, I know pop, but classical is not my field. So I'm not at all. I don't mind at all to send someone to another teacher that's better for that. So.
Oh, absolutely, and this perhaps is a point to make too. I mean, I'm a woman of a certain age, shall we put it that way, and I can't demonstrate for a baritone. There's no way that I can do that. If I'm working with a young baritone, they need to hear the sound. So I will either team teach with a male colleague of mine who can do some demonstration because you need to hear it. And then I might help with some technical stuff. I have some other baritones who are more experienced that I work with, which I very, very much enjoy, but I can't demonstrate. And I think this is another very important point. And what Estill gives us is an understanding of function, for different voices, so that we don't need to demonstrate. It doesn't stop me trying, obviously, but failing. But
Can you
I can't do that.
sound for us, Emery? Would that be possible?
Sorry?
Would you be able to demonstrate your baritone sound for us?
No, nobody needs to hear that, honestly. But it makes, I think that's really, really important. And I say to some of my young male teachers, and not so young male teachers, hi Tim, we're just talking about teaching different styles and who we teach, and I was just saying that as a woman of a certain age, I can't demonstrate for a baritone. I can't. What's the point? But so if I'm working with a young baritone, I'm just talking about team teaching and working collaboratively, I will sometimes send a young baritone off to work with a male colleague of mine who can demonstrate, because you need to hear the sound. With the older baritones that I work with, it's not so much of a problem. I was just saying, there's no point demonstrating, although it doesn't always stop me. But I actually think this is a very, very important point. If you're a 60-year-old tenor, is there any point teaching an 18-year-old soprano? She needs to be able to hear it. And I think that because the demonstration that you're making won't sound the same and won't feel the same. And I think it depends on the teacher, but I think looking to see are we a match as a teacher is hugely, hugely important. And I bring that up because that's exactly a situation that I have encountered. And I think it's a problem that this young girl was completely adrift because she didn't know what sound she was meant to be making. So the importance of demonstration, of knowing the style, of having colleagues around that you're able to bring in as part of a team, knowing when to not demonstrate. Talking about belt, once I learned how to belt, and I was working with a pop singer who was belting, and I was doing a little bit of demonstration, and I just thought, I'm not doing that again, because that's a musical theatre belt that I'm doing. That's not a pop belt. They are different in timbre. They're different. I would say that the function is pretty much the same, but the little adjustments that you make it a little bit different. And I just thought, I need to, until I can do what she's doing, there's no point me demonstrating.
Well, that's the wondrous world of mirror neurons, right?
Yes, but so much, of course, for voice we can't see. We can hear it, but it doesn't mean we can reproduce it.
Yeah.
And that's when we need to make shifts, because, with belting, with my own experience, and this is true for anyone who can't belt, you can hear a difference. It doesn't mean we can reproduce it. So not everything is reproducible in that way. If you start young enough, but I think if you're coming at it as an adult, it's the same with opera. If you don't know how to set it up, just hearing it is, it's important, but we also need to look at what we do.
A bit of light-hearted questions before we finish up.
The first one, if you had to pick one exercise, what would be your favorite one?
Estill siren. You say the word sing, and you hold the ng, sing, and then starting where you speak, you begin to just move up and down the range. Sing. And you gradually move from high to low, keeping it quiet, clear. Don't get louder as you get higher. Don't get breathy as you get lower. And what this does is it works on the other conditions that I've been talking about that we need for pitch. In order to go higher in the range, in order for the vocal folds to vibrate faster, other things need to happen, one of which is the larynx needs to rise. And that movement is muscular and does not require any increase in breath pressure. There is an increase in breath pressure because the vocal folds are vibrating faster, but we don't need to add to it. If we add to it, the vocal folds will either be blown apart because they're making such light contact, or they'll thicken up and you'll get louder as you get higher. So what the siren does is lots and lots of things. We are maintaining the most efficient vocal fold contact as we change pitch and as it becomes more difficult to do so. We are isolating muscular effort, the effort to move the larynx, from breath pressure. We are isolating muscular effort and changes in pitch from effort, from it becoming louder, from volume. We are encouraging movement of the larynx. We are balancing effort. We are controlling volume. It does so many wonderful things. It is absolutely my favourite exercise. I give it to everybody, actors included.
It's a great example, thank you. Do you have any favourite singers?
Oh, yes. It entirely depends on mood and whom I'm listening to and what I enjoy, but for all sorts of different reasons. I'm a big Jennifer Hudson fan.
Who is
I have
it?
to say, I think that some people, can you believe it? I think she is extraordinary, an extraordinary artist, an extraordinary range of sound. And I love the sound of her voice and I love her commitment, and I think she's terrific. I love Frank Sinatra. I come back and I have a little listen to him for his artistry and his skill. I love Kiri Te Kanawa because her voice is so distinctive, and not just because she's like me, she's a Kiwi. That's the only thing we have in common. And gosh, where else do I start? Who do I go back to and listen to? It really just depends on what I feel like, really. In terms of the contemporary singers, I'm very taken with Billie Eilish. I think she's a terrific songwriter, and her latest album, she can really sing. A lot of the time it's very breathy, but she can also make a pretty powerful sound. She's incredibly musical. I'm a bit of a Swiftie, has to be said. I think she's extraordinary, and I'll tell you I have a little theory about one of the reasons why she's so popular. And I think one of the reasons she's so popular, she tells a lot of her songs, not all of them by any means are based on her life, but you can hear the words. I went to her concert, was it last year? And everybody goes on and they sing the lyrics. How often does that happen? And so because her diction is fantastic, but nobody talks about it, which makes it perfect diction, because that's the point of it. And so because people understand the story, they are involved in the story. They are involved in what she's doing. Nobody talks about her diction. I think she's very, very clever. Who else do I really like? I love Bono's voice. That's just classic. It's but such wonderful artistry and singing. Love the sound of it.
I think it's quite remarkable how eclectic that group of people is, but that also shows your love for voice because it doesn't matter. It's not style driven. It's every option is beautiful or can be beautiful. I like that answer actually.
Absolutely. And we haven't even started talking about speaking voices, but there is also speaking voices that I love. But I like it when people connect. I like connection. I like to feel something. I like to feel that the story is being told, and whatever that is. I don't particularly like voices. I don't like I'm going to say not being able to understand, not being taken on a journey, but voices that sound too much like other voices on the whole.
I understand. So we have this sort of segment in our podcast, which we're going to translate for the first time because it's actually a little bit of a gimmick in Dutch, but it's impossible to translate. It's called hashtag I just don't get it. And it's what we're asking for is, has there ever been in a teaching environment, not necessarily one that you've heard, or maybe a student that's come in, that has said something and that you were like, what does that even mean? And then what we try to do, and especially now that there's three of us, we try to actually explain it in very concrete terms.
Oh, no, I did hear one. This is true. This is honestly true. This was like, and if you can translate this, please do. You've got to imagine like socks at the back of your throat.
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Are they smelly or not?
I don't know. I have no idea what that's meant to mean.
Well, the only thing the imagery to my mind brings up the idea that the space in the back needs to be more open, that maybe the larynx goes slightly downwards, that the sound becomes a little bit darker, more of a classical tone, more of a woolly, warm tone. That would be my first instinct here.
Well, the thing I have to think about is a former teacher told me to have like big curtains in the back of my throat and really open them, which was of
Retraction.
course retraction. So I'm kind of relating to that at the moment.
Well,
I think that says it all.
that's a very, very imaginative response to that. I just, yeah. But that's one that stayed with me. But sometimes I was actually collecting. I was making a little collection of some of the things that people have been told, and it's quite
Well,
extraordinary.
that's basically what we try to do with this segment. So thank you so much for that answer. It's a really good. I hadn't heard that one before.
Same here.
Thank goodness.
And last but not least, we have one more thing. We have a lot of quick fire questions. So you get two options, and you have you can choose either one.
You have no time to think about it.
All right.
Here we go.
Chocolate or biscuits? Quick fire!
Biscuits. Sorry, biscuits. I'm thinking which biscuit, which chocolate. That's not a simple
you don't
question.
you don't get the option.
All right, second one. Coffee or tea?
Tea in the morning, coffee in the afternoon.
Left-handed or right-handed?
Right.
With or without vibrato?
Depends. That's not a yeah. That depends. Less of it though. Definitely less of it.
High or low?
Oh, I can't. Well, if it's Jennifer Hudson and you're going high, I want to hear that. But what if if you're Lou Rawls, I want to hear that lovely low bass
You do
baritone.
realise
So,
that you're messing up our segment here, right? Because you're not giving
I
the
know,
right
but
answers.
these are not yes or no answers. I'm sorry, but
Well, we're
they're
nearly there.
Let's try again. Loud or soft?
just depends. Soft sometimes. Yes. Yeah. I know I'm completely ruining it.
Pizza or tapas?
Ooh, tapas.
Early morning singing lesson or late evening singing lesson?
Late evening.
Musical theatre or opera?
Musical theatre.
I think I know the answer to the last one. Singing technique or singing interpretation?
Technique.
Interesting. We would have guessed interpretation based on your story.
I think it depends on what you're doing, you see, because to interpret, you need technique. You need access to your voice, and then you need to know what to do with it. Limited access is limited interpretation.
Okay, so this might become the leader of the episode then. No, that's a great answer. Thank you. Anne-Marie, do you have any remaining questions for us?
I don't think I do. I just want to say thank you very, very much for what's been a very stimulating and very enjoyable hour. Thank you very
No,
much for
thank you
asking
for
me.
your time.
Thank you for being
We
yeah.
really appreciate it. So this is where we say our traditional Dutch goodbye. We say, doei voice boys. If you want to try, join in.
Doei, voice boys!
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
The Voice Boys.